Welcome to All Nature Connected, a podcast created by the Forest Bathing Institute, where we explore all nature connected topics, including nature and health, nature inspired lifestyle, nature connection and forest bathing, nature preservation, and eco awareness. We hope that this podcast will inspire you to become more connected with nature and your own health and well-being. Hello, everyone. This is Olga from the Forest Bathing Institute, All Nature Connected podcast. Today, we have a very special guest joining us today, Neil Shah, who is the founder of the Stress Management Society. So, hello, Neil.
Hi, Olga. Lovely to be here with you. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. So, Neil, could you tell us a bit more about your organization? And also, you have a really interesting story about how you founded the Stress Management Society. So, could you talk a little bit more about that, please?
Okay, so there are two very big questions. I'll start with who are the Stress Management Society? So, Stress Management Society is a non-profit organization now operating internationally that essentially came into existence to contribute to creating a happier, healthier, more resilient world. I will get into sort of the reasons why I set the organization up shortly, but ultimately it's to provide advice, support, and guidance to both individuals and organizations that want to understand the true impact of stress and poor mental health and poor well-being, and want to consider what actions that they can take. We do all kinds of things, including sort of raising awareness, campaigns. We sometimes get commissioned to do research projects. But the thing that we're best known for is obviously the reason you reached out to us in the first place, and that's Stress Awareness Month, which happens every April. And I'm really proud to say over the last 2 decades from running and being stewards of Stress Awareness Month, at the last count, we've reached more than 100 million people, which for me is really something to be so proud of, that I've got an incredible, passionate team that want to leave the world better than we found it. And that's kind of why we do this work. And the sad thing is that in the time that we have existed, the issue hasn't got better, it's got worse, much worse. Bear in mind, when we came into existence in 2003, that was before the smartphone. There was no iPhone. There was no social media in the ways that we use it now. There was no Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. I only expected that things would get better as we advance in technology and the way we communicate, the way we live. I expected us to be arriving into a Star Trek utopian vision of the future where everybody's happy and we're exploring the galaxy and doing wonderful things. Actually, the reverse is true. That since then, we've now arrived at a point in 2025 where the main cause of death for a man under the age of 50 in Western society is suicide. A lot of people will be shocked to hear that it is now also the main cause of death for a 10 to 19-year-old. So the biggest killer of young people is suicide. And also bear in mind, there are many places in the world we don't even record it, where mental health and suicide is not recorded or registered because for various different cultural reasons. We find it in places like Latin America, Eastern Europe, Middle East, parts of Africa and Asia. They don't even record it. So the scale of the issue might be actually much worse than we're discussing. So even with the stats that we have, it's shocking. Also, bear in mind, 4 years ago, we shut the world down for an issue that for the vast majority of people wasn't that big a deal, right? But the impact of how they dealt with it was a big issue, if that makes sense. And we're still feeling the repercussions of that. But because life never went back to how it was pre-2020, and I don't think it ever will. So we've got to bear in mind there's a knock-on effect. And this is why this conversation is even more important today than it's ever been. And the second part of your question is, what's the origin story? You know, how did I come to be here having this conversation with you? Mental health, well-being, this field is not my professional or academic background. It's my life experience. I started this organization in 2003 after I went through an experience where in my mid 20s or early 20s, should I say, I set up a business in IT recruitment. I got into that field because I saw an opportunity to make money. It wasn't my passion. Money was my passion, to have success, to be recognized. And if you've ever watched the movie The Wolf of Wall Street, when I watched that movie, I was like, my gosh, this is literally my life story. Like all elements of it, fast life, cars, drugs, partying, and making a lot of money. And when you're young and things happen very quickly, it's kind of like when people win the lottery. Most people that win the lottery end up with very bad outcomes because if something happens suddenly and quickly, there isn't a gradual progression of learning how to handle the incremental growth in your success or your financial status. Does that make sense? You have no value for it. And what happened to me was very similar to winning the lottery. As much as it wasn't just something that fell on my lap, I worked for it. It was easy. And when I went through that experience, I was very much in my ego. And I've now learned through life experience that when you're not on the path that's taking you to your spiritual destiny, the universe has a way of coming in and giving you a course correction. And mine wasn't a gentle nudge, it was a baseball bat around the head. So 4 years after starting that business and turning into a multi-million pound business, opening offices in different parts of the world, winning awards, getting invited to number 10 Downing Street to have breakfast with the Prime Minister. Um, it was Tony Blair. I'm not proud of that, knowing what we know about him now. But at the time, you're in your mid-20s. You're there with Richard Reed from Innocent, who sold his company for 750 million pounds to Coca-Cola. My story ended differently, but there was two of us young guys at the time, two very successful entrepreneurs having breakfast with Tony Blair. It was incredible. But as quickly as it went up, it came down. And I went through an experience where I think 3, 4 month period of my life where I lost everything. I'd made some poor decisions, like asking my best friend to be my business partner, not because he brought any value to the business. It's like I'm having a great time, come and have a great time with me, which was good, which was fine when things were good. But when things became more challenging, it didn't work out so well. And I ended up having an experience where I lost the business, I lost my money, cars repossessed. Most of the people that I thought were my closest friends turned their back on me. The person I was in a relationship was cheating on me. Literally every aspect of my life that I defined myself by disintegrated. And if you define your life by what you have and what you've achieved and the stuff and the people in your life, the moment that goes, you've got nothing to define you anymore. And that was the challenge. That I felt like I'd lost everything. I hadn't, but at that point, I was looking at my landscape of my life and I had nothing left. And this is where that kind of led me to have what I now describe as a breakthrough, but at the time was described as a breakdown. The depths of which I got to the point where I literally didn't want to be here anymore. And I took action against that. I attempted to end my own life. So when I talk about, issues around suicidality and the issues that particularly men experience around this, because they are very at-risk, vulnerable demographic when it comes to suicidality. I'm not just talking from my professional expertise. I'm also talking from first-hand experience because I've been there. I know what it's like. The depths of that experience, as I said, I tried to check out of my life and I failed at that as well. And when you've tried to literally turn the off switch on your life and screwed that up, there's nowhere else left to go. So it's like, what do I do now? I remember when after kind of I was found and taken to hospital, my parents wouldn't let me go back to my house because they didn't trust me. So they basically forced me to go and stay with them. And I remember now, I was like 27, 28 at the time. I remember being in my parents' back bedroom, my dad screaming down, EastEnders is on, and my mum's made dinner. And I'm like, what the hell happened to my life? 1 minute I'm on top of the world, literally on top of the world. And now like it's like I'm a child back in my parents' house. And I remember that was a really cold, hard slap in my face. And the only thing I could think about is how do I get myself back on top of the world again? And I think this is potentially where there's a bridge with my area of expertise and yours, because I ended up where I am right now because of some experiences I had, not quite in a forest, but very similar. The In that place of wanting to get myself back on top of the world again, I thought, well, that's literally what I need to do. I need to get back on top of the world. So the idea I had is I need to go to the highest place I can think of. The highest place I could think of was Mount Everest. It's literally the highest point on the planet, right? I know this sounds crazy, and this is in and of itself probably a topic for a whole nother podcast. So don't think we're going to get time to get into this story. But the long and short of it is that I was diagnosed with OCD when I was in my teens. At first, I thought, "Oh my God, there's something wrong with me. It's a problem." I've subsequently recognized it's the very reason I've accomplished all the things that I have in life because I literally don't have an off switch, and that's for how I would describe the experience of OCD. For a lot of people, when things get painful, challenging, or uncomfortable, they stop. I can't, literally can't. There are negative ways that shown up. Like, for example, if I'm very stressed, I will know because there'll be blood on my toothbrush and I'll be brushing my teeth for like 15 minutes and I can't stop. And I know, and cognitively, I'm recognizing what's happening, but there's something inside me that can't stop. Or silly things like, having to go back and check the front door like 17 times and all of these kind of things. Um, but in a positive way, I have run many marathons in my life and completed many triathlons, even when I'm injured, because I can't stop. Like, I can't stop until I've finished what I set out to, which is why I can't clean my house, for example, because it would take me 3 days and I'd be there with a toothbrush and the floorboards. So it's easier for me to pay someone and a lot less stressful than to do it myself. But when I had an idea like that, because the way that I'm wired, it's like, I'm going to make this happen. Now, bear in mind, I'm flat broke. I've literally just recovering from a serious issue with my mental health. I can't afford to go and buy myself some food, let alone go to the Himalayas and climb Mount Everest. But when I put my mind to something, there's very little that stands in my way. It took me 2 weeks to raise the money to get sponsorship. Then I found myself going out to do something I've never done before. I'm not a mountaineer. I had some outbound training and did a bit of preparation, trained hard because I had nothing else to do. But yeah, I kind of went out pretty green and no idea what I was letting myself in for. But the crux of this story is it was never about the mountain. It was never about getting to the summit. William Blake said, when men and mountains meet, strange things happen that don't happen when you're jostling in the street. I don't come from a religious background. Religion in my house growing up was football. My dad was a very hardcore football fan, and that was a very big part of our lifestyle growing up. I think at that point I would have described myself as an atheist. I'm now on the mountain, um, attempting to get as high up her as I can. And, along the way, I'd learned a few things. Everest, I'm sorry to say, is such a BS name. George Everest did not find her 150 years ago. And the gall that he named the mountain after him is, for me, is actually quite disgusting. And the fact that we still refer to her as Everest is, for me, shocking. She has a name. Her name is Sagarmatha, and translated into English means Mother of the Earth. Far more fitting name. And that's what the locals call her, Sagarmatha. So to refer to her as Everest for me is a travesty because that is taking away from what she actually is. Now, coming back to the point, I'm not religious at this point in my life. And I'm in view of Everest coming up towards base camp, and I had a moment. Dare I say it, a spiritual epiphany, which ultimately resulted in a conversation with the mountain where I'm on my hands and knees crying my eyes out because she had a message. And I heard her very clearly. Now, I also appreciate there are skeptical people who will be listening to this saying, low oxygen, you're a high altitude, your brain's playing tricks on you, you're punch drunk, etc. All of that may be true, but it doesn't matter because it doesn't change the nature of the conversation. It doesn't take away the power of the content of the conversation. If it was me in a high altitude, low oxygen environment and it caused me to have that hallucination, it doesn't matter because the end result was the same. It was still a spiritual epiphany. It still changed the course of my life. And essentially, the message was, you're sitting here feeling sorry for yourself, crying at everything you've lost. You've just been given a beautiful gift. Everything you've experienced is the most beautiful gift that you can ever receive. What are you going to do with it? And that question in that moment quite literally changed the course of my life, because that's where I knew that I'd had that experience, so I could help others that experience the same kind of thing. That's where in my mind it was clear that's what I was going to do. That I didn't know it would be called the Stress Management Society, but that's where the Stress Management Society was born in my mind. I kind of came back from that experience after spending some time out in the Himalayas. I spent a bit of time in a Buddhist monastery, experienced mindfulness for the first time. But also, when you're in a mountain, and also 2003, there was a Maoist insurgency and they'd blown up all the communications towers. So when you're on the mountain, there is no communication with the outside world. There is no cell phone coverage. There's no internet. There's no email. I had whatever it was, a couple of months out there where I was literally there and nowhere else. Every so often you'd find someone with a sat phone and pay them a bit of money so you could maybe check in with home. But other than that, we were there present. And it's so interesting that spawned my experience, because we live in a world that is less present now than ever before. We're literally in the zombie apocalypse. I was walking around London yesterday because I had a client, and you're literally seeing people walking around looking at a screen like zombies. On the tube, 90% of people are looking at a screen. London was voted as the loneliest city on the planet last year. We literally won that award. I kid you not, I'm not making that up. I encourage you to look that up for yourself. How is it there's 9 million people in London? It's the loneliest place in the world. So, like I said, like this was kind of the origin point. I kind of came back a bit of a sandal wearing hippie where I wanted to change the world. And money's the root of all evil, because all my pain had been directly as a result of the loss of business, loss of money. And I guess for a short period of time, I was a human version of Lassie. If you remember the reference, if you're old enough to remember Lassie, the dog that wandered around from town to town helping people, that was kind of me. I got trained, I got qualified in counseling and psychotherapy, in various different alternative practices. I got trained in coaching and a number of different things because I wanted to help people. But what I found the first few years of doing that, I wasn't moving anywhere particularly quickly, and I couldn't pay my own bills. And that wasn't what I had in mind. It wasn't about helping a few people along the way. I wanted to leave the world better than I found it, not for ego or grandeur, because right now we need people to step up as leaders to show us a better way. And that's kind of the calling that I felt. That was my driving force, is it doesn't matter if people remember my name, but what I have influenced or impacted in the world lives longer than my flesh and my name. And that was the deepest desire. So I guess a few years in, I got to the point where I realized that, yeah, this isn't working either. That all about money didn't work for me, but also not worrying about money also didn't work. So I recognized that there's a middle path, whereas actually what we do had real world impact. So we could work with large corporate organizations and run programs that they pay for, which help to fund all our non-commercial activities. And that's where what is now called International Wellbeing Insights, we changed the name a few years ago, was born. And through that, over the years, we've run global programs with companies like Mars, that we're currently working with, one of our biggest clients. We just started to work with companies like Adecco. We've run programs for Philips, the health technology company, Allianz Insurance, some of the biggest brands on the planet we've had the opportunity to work with. And through that, not only does that help to pay the bills and give us kind of a global presence, but that also helps to fund all of our non-commercial activities and allows us to continue doing the work that makes a positive difference. So clearly that spiritual epiphany wasn't just for me, that I was in, dare I say it, in the right place at the right time, and I was chosen to walk this path. I didn't choose this path chose me.
This is so beautiful, Neil. And, it's just, it feels like watching a movie when you were telling these experiences. It just felt in my head like there is a book out there. And of course, we will give people the details if they want to learn more about your journey, which I would personally like to learn more about. But it's such an interesting thing. You said Yeah, I had similar experience with nature. This experience that we sometimes describe as transcendence, where you are in the moment and you are so connected to that experience, to your environment, that you can get epiphanies, you can get some ideas that you haven't thought about, maybe creative solutions to problems. And I'm sure that the world is a better place with now what you're doing with stress management society, and also working with corporates, and I'm sure you must be feeling better for yourself, finding yourself. So I was gonna say, so lots of things that you mentioned fascinating, because I didn't know about the statistics for young people and suicide, as well as men, and about the London being the loneliest city in the world, which is very sad, of course, I think, for many of us to hear, because as you said, 9 million people here. So why is it that we can't connect? So the thing is about stress, and maybe you resonate with that idea, but of course you're working on raising awareness about stress, is that stress, sometimes people think it's kind of a thing, but a thing out there. So what I found is that people often struggle to identify with the symptoms of stress, or how they apply to their specific physiology, or how they manifest in themselves. So I was just gonna, I know we only have 5 minutes or so left, but I just wanted to ask you if you have any suggestions for how one might look for those symptoms of stress, and also maybe where one can find some of the tips, as I know on your website you have some of the tips of what we can do once we've identified that we have stress.
It's an interesting question. And I think if you'd asked me that question 5 or 6 years ago, I would have answered it in a different way. Today, July 2025, we're in a world of content overload. If you want tips and strategies to deal with stress, if you go onto YouTube, TikTok, or Instagram, you'll find thousands upon thousands, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of influencers say, do this, buy this, etc. I think we've arrived at a point where it's beyond self-care. It's beyond just do some breathing and some meditation. We now have a much more serious issue, and it's not about dealing with the symptoms, it's understanding the cause. Why has this happened? How have we arrived at this point? And part of this is the choices that we make. Most of us don't even recognize stress because we live in a state of stress all the time. You're constantly in a state of survival, of fear, of perceived threat or attack. So obviously you don't recognize the state when it's become normalized, right? If you normally were relaxed and you go about your life and you have your community and you do your work and everything's kind of fine and happy, and then a saber-toothed tiger wanders into your village, you're going to know because it's a very different state to your normal state. But if you are walking through your life as if you're being attacked by a saber-toothed tiger, how could you possibly recognize that as stress? Because that's just your normal state. This is indicative of most people in Western society, I'm afraid. And this isn't my research. If you look up the research, I'm sure, Olga, given your background that you're familiar with, the research around blue zones, the areas in the world where people typically live to 100 years of age. It's not just they live longer, but it's the quality of their life. It's the vitality they are able to experience towards the latter periods of their life that for me is crucial. And there are many different reasons for this, which we do not have the time to go into. I encourage anyone that's interested to either look up the documentary on Netflix or read the research that you'll easily be able to find online. But one of the key components was about community. And ultimately, when we live and function as a community, people have got your back and you've got theirs. We have blind spots. Even for me, because I work in stress management, in mental health and well-being, I'm a so-called expert on the subject. People believe that I never get stressed, which is as far from the truth as you could possibly get. I get stressed now more than ever before because I'm dealing with issues at a much bigger level, a much bigger scale. I have a much bigger responsibility. But I am really lucky and grateful that I've got people around me. I have a community that have got my back and I've got theirs. And that for me is the crucial thing. You have a blind spot. I could say, well, look out for this, that, and the other. But if you're stressed, you won't see it until it's too late. which is why you're asking, how do I recognize stress? Because if you had the sensitivity to tune into the needs of your body, you would recognize when it's not operating in an optimal fashion. You would know that you are hungry long before your tummy starts rumbling. You would know you're thirsty long before your throat is as dry as the Sahara Desert. You would know you need rest long before you're falling asleep at the wheel on the way home. You would know that you're stressed long before you've got palpitations and anxiety and your muscles are so tense that you can't even drop your shoulders. And what I'm saying here is if you're recognizing at those points, it's already too late. It would be like asking me to help you to recognize a heart attack while you're in the middle of having one. It's a lot easier to prevent it from happening in the first place. And that, as I said, and Olga, with all due respect, the question you've asked is not a great question because you're asking to recognize something at a point where you probably got less options on being able to tackle it. Like with physical fitness, you don't go to the gym once and expect to be fit. It's slow effort over time that it creates incremental fitness. And what happens is that as you kind of get into the habit, your resilience improves, your physical resilience improves, right? It's the same with mental and emotional resilience. Is we need to be engaging in activities that build that level of resilience. So it's not about recognize I'm stressed, now do something about it. Is I build my level of resilience. So I don't have that experience anymore, but also to make better life choices. Most of us have got one of these in our pockets and another bigger one and another bigger one somewhere else. And that's got a button on the side of it. Well, I have an iPhone. It doesn't have a button to turn it off anymore. I have to press a button, slide something, stand on my head, rub my tummy at the same time to turn it off. Most people don't turn these devices off, which means you're always on. You're not AI. None of us are. We have biological needs. We need to use the bathroom and eat food and sleep. But we are operating on the same rules as AI that we don't switch off. We are on and active from the moment we open eyes to the moment we go to sleep. There is a consequence to that. So for me, prevention is better than cure. And I think the framing of your question is around curing. You can't. You actually need stress because if you are walking in the forest and a bear jumps out in front of you, you want to really hope you get stressed because it's going to equip you to fight or run away or climb up a tree to the best of your ability. It's not about eradicating stress. I'm going to ask you to consider stress kind of like Goldilocks and the three bears. You know, Goldilocks wandering through the forest happens upon the cottage. The bears are in the supermarket doing their weekly shop. She goes into the kitchen, finds three bowls of porridge. One's too hot, one's too cold, and one's just right. It's the same with stress. Too much, you're going to burn out. It's not sustainable. Your your mental, physical, and emotional functions will start to diminish. You're more likely to get ill. You're exhausted. You can't sleep at night. We start to disengage. We have high levels of emotional and sort of reaction. But then the other end, stress is too cold. There isn't enough stress, or there is a perception or a lack of stress. That's where you can go into depression, apathy, indifference. You lose motivation, lose confidence, self-esteem. We become very negative, bitter, cynical. And as I said, ultimately you can go into depression. Either ends of the spectrum, you end up becoming non-functional because whether you have a burnout or you go into depression, you get to the point at the depths of which you don't engage in daily life. People are, won't get out of bed, won't brush their teeth, won't wash. They just are not engaging in kind of their daily life. But then you've got the sweet spot where the porridge is just right. This is still stress, but it's stress channeled in a way that's driving the best performance. So whether you are writing a report, doing a podcast, running a race, baking a cake, there is a degree of stress that's going to drive the best performance. Thinking about me and you right now, if neither of us had stress about this podcast, it would be awful. Firstly, why would I have even shown up? If there was no stress about I'm going to let Olga down, I might have just thought it's a nice day. I'm just going to go and have a swim or read my book. So there was the stress about doing the right thing, the best I can, that drove me here. If I had too much stress, I'd be sweating, panicking. I wouldn't be able to string a sentence together. I'd be incoherent. And you would know, right? But because I'm able to, in this moment, harness the little bit of stress that I'm experiencing in a way that's creating passion, energy, and enthusiasm, I'm able to, I'd like to believe, perform somewhere near my best. And this is true in any given situation, no matter what you're doing. It's not about eradicating stress, but it's about recognizing, is the stress porridge too hot or is it too cold? And if it is too hot, too cold, if it's too hot, what do we do? How do I cool it down? What are some cooling techniques? I could go for a walk. I could take a break. I could sit here and just meditate, watch my breath, read a book, listen to some music. If it isn't enough, what can I do to activate myself? Maybe I go do some physical exercise, ride my bike, go for a run, do something that's going to raise my energy levels. It's going to kind of inspire me to be able to drive myself forward. And this, as I said, is the question: is your stress porridge too hot, too cold, or just right? If it's just right, what can I do to maintain it in that way? And that's where, as I said, if you find it's too hot, there's a lot of things that you can find very easily to be able to change that state. The quickest way to change your psychology is to change your physiology. You want to change what's going on in your mind, change what's going on in your body. The reverse is also true. If you want to change what's going on in your body, if you're suffering from any kind of physical ailments, your mind has a huge part to play in the healing process. But we deal with these things as separate entities. They are not. They're two sides of the same coin. You cannot impact your physical health without impacting your mental health, and you cannot impact your mental health without impacting your physical health. When we deal with that holistically, that's where you're going to get more positive outcomes. So part of this is, I'm not here to tell people what they should and shouldn't do. I'm here to inspire and empower. Inspire, give people hope and belief that things can get better. Harvard research has suggested people that have hope tend to have better lives, live longer, be more successful, financially better off, and have better relationships. Well, why? This is not just some law of attraction, woolly hippie notion. If you have hope, what does hope inspire? Action. If I believe things can get better, guess what? I get up and do something about it. If I believe my health can improve, I'm going to get off the sofa and go for some exercise, to eat well, to cook some nice food. If I don't, then I'm just going to slump on the sofa, binge on Netflix, order some Uber Eats, and drink a few glasses of wine, right? It's the hope that's inspired action. If I have hope my relationships get better, I will take action to show up as the best version of myself, to work on what I can do to improve my relationships. If I have hope and belief that the world can be a better place, that's what gets me out of bed every morning. Because I genuinely believe that things will be better if enough of us believe that, have hope, are inspired, and then take action. Because this image that we have of the world that is filled with doom, death, devastation, and destruction, it's true to a degree, but it's not actually the full picture. In fact, it's the small part of the picture. There is many, many more examples of wonderful, amazing things that happen every single day. Human beings doing great things to make the world a better place. You just don't hear about them. So we're judging the world not based on reality, not based on the true information. We're judging the world based on the image that is being projected onto us.
Thank you, Neil. And I think it's so important what you said about stress. So what I was thinking when you were talking about stress, and my question as well, which I think I have to say, sometimes we think that it's like on and off switch, stress, either there is a stress or there is no stress. But as you were explaining, and actually something that we do educate people about, how our nervous system works, and that it's not just an on-off switch. In fact, sometimes it's both on. And there are states that we're now researching when both are on. But it's about also not just a quick fix. It's about the lifestyle. And as you were, Neil, talking about the causes and the importance of understanding what's where your middle is, where the balance is. It's not just about living stress-free life, because that wouldn't help you. That wouldn't help you to catch opportunities. That wouldn't help you to reach goals when you need to. And sometimes historically, even we needed to be more active at certain times for survival and also for thriving as a society. But I think it's a very interesting thing that you started talking about it. And I think more of us need to be raising awareness about
stress as an epidemic, but it has deeper causes behind it, not just that, hey, you've had a bad day and you're stressed. It's kind of going, it's a lifestyle. And as you were talking about the phone addiction, etc., there are lots of causes for that, but also about being more looking for a balance rather than an on-off switch, a quick fix. So lots of things that you talked about, I think many people might think, oh, I'm already doing that. Oh, I haven't thought about it, but this is something that I was doing, maybe cycling or running when I was feeling a bit low energy, but now I stopped doing it. So yeah, thank you, Neil. I'm sure there's so much for us to learn from you. So I would say, yeah, visit the website. Of course, you have a very comprehensive website, but where else can people learn more about your amazing work and maybe read one of your books? I know you've written quite a few. So if you can just say a few things of where we can follow from this conversation.
So the first place to start is our website, which is www.stress.org.uk. If you're interested in the work that we do in the workplace, it's wellbeing.work. So www.wellbeing.work. We have an Instagram channel where we share a lot of information. On YouTube, we're constantly putting up new videos on YouTube. I believe we also do have a TikTok as well, but I don't really have much involvement with that. So basically pretty much all the social channels, including LinkedIn. We do a free monthly webinar that we typically have between 500 and 1,000 people that join that. It's a live interactive session, so it's not just me talking for an hour. You actually get an opportunity to interact on that as well. That happens once a month. And we have a newsletter, which at the last count, I think reaches about 50,000 people. That's also free of charge. We're sending lots of information and tips. And I'd love to invite you, Olga, to guest contribute to one of our newsletters to talk about the wonderful work that you're doing.
Thank you. I'll be honored. So thank you very much, Neil, for this interview and opportunity to learn more about you and your organization. So feel free to get in touch, our listeners, with Neil's organization and also join Neil in one of his monthly talks. So thank you, Neil.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.